new Maze Runner film is in development at 20th Century Studios. Stick around to find out who's working on it and how it fits into the current trilogy. I'm Brennan Sun for the New Wave Nerds. Like and subscribe below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's read the news. From The Hollywood Reporter, exclusive, the Maze Runner reboot in the works with Transcendence scribe Jack Paglen in talks to write. 20th Century Studios is developing a new installment of the action franchise based on the James Dashner books. There's a photo of Jack Paglen right there. Let's read. The Maze Runner is back at the starting line. 20th Century Studios is rebooting the sci-fi action-adventure franchise, which ran as a trilogy from 2014 to 2018. I remember the original ones. I actually read the book series in, I believe would have been in middle school, probably around 6th or 7th grade, if I had to guess. It wouldn't have been 8th because I remember very specifically going to go see Maze Runner: The Scorch Trials in theaters with my cousin and some of our friends, Spencer, with Spencer and some friends, because our whole group had read the book and we'd all enjoyed them. I gotta admit, the movies themselves were a little bit disappointing. They weren't incredible by any definition of the word. I didn't feel like they were particularly faithful adaptations. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head now in what way I didn't think they were faithful, but I remember walking out of the theater and not really feeling like they were true adaptations. It felt like they took the basic idea and then just decided to run with it in whatever direction that they really chose. And as somebody who had read the books, and generally my rule of thumb is if you're going to adapt a story, I think you should at least try to stay as true to the source material as possible. Obviously, there are certain allowances that need to be made. I mean, okay, we're talking about adaptations. Top of mind, for me at least, one of the most high-profile adaptations in the most recent years is obviously the Dune duology, because there's only two movies as of right now. But I feel like those are very faithful adaptations. Dune, the book series, is obviously very expansive and incredibly over the top, and there's so much going on, and it's very difficult to adapt a lot of that to screen, especially when you're trying to formulate either in the case of Lynch, 1 2-hour movie, or in the case of Denis, 2.5-hour movies. It's even with the 5 hours that Denis took, it's very difficult to adapt just the sheer amount of source material there is to a film. And so I think Denis is a good example of an adaptation that is as true to the source material as I think you can really be. It's very faithful. In The Maze Runner, I did not feel like did that. I felt like the first film was pretty true to the material, pretty faithful. I thought it was decent. It was certainly fun. And then the second film is when things really started to go downhill. That was when the differences started to become more apparent in where the directors and the writers decided to divert from the source material. They become a little bit more obvious, and I thought the quality, there was a marked decrease in quality for the second and third films. So I was not a huge fan. I don't know necessarily why we're doing this quote reboot. I'll explain why I'm using the quotes as we get deeper into the article here, but I don't know why this is happening. I mean, I understand from the business aspect because as I learned doing a little bit of research on this, the original trilogy actually, that franchise almost grossed $1 billion worldwide. Domestically, they did not do very well. I think they, domestically over the whole course of I don't know how they determine it, but gross domestic box. It's not box office, I guess. I don't know. I think they returned the budget. I think they'd actually did they double it? I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I know that they at least made the budget back domestically. But then they were actually a pretty decent hit worldwide. I think each film made around 300 million or so. So from that perspective, I understand why you would want to make it. But who's asking for this? Like who decided? Like who asked for a Maze Runner continuation? I mean, I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, because they're young adult, and I they're young adult books, and so I haven't, stayed with it, obviously, since I'm not in middle school anymore. But I think there's just the 3 books. I don't think that there's any continuation, any spin-off series. I mean, he's got, or maybe, let's see, what's this? No, yeah, this is a separate series entirely. Yeah, that was a good series too. I don't know what the actual series is called, but the book that I'm looking at right now, I guess I could show you, is called The Kill Order. I think I remember these. These are like sci-fi dystopia. It's all about an AI or... Man, I don't remember. I would have read them in middle school, so I've forgotten since then. But, I mean, those were good. But like I've said, I don't think there's any... it's like there's no sequel source material, and so it's not like the kind of thing where the fans were like, "Oh, I would like to see this story adapted or anything else." So it's very weird. I don't know who necessarily asked for this. Like who saw that there was a lack, or there was a source of fandom who would come back to see this. I'm not 100% sure. It is a little bit weird. I'm not so sure. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me, but who am I? Let's get back to the article here. The Disney arm is in negotiations to tap Jack Paglen, perhaps best known for writing the Johnny Depp starring sci-fi movie Transcendence, to pen the script for the new installment. Now, I didn't see Transcendence, but I know that as far as like a ranking goes, it's not exactly particularly high. Yeah, 6.2 stars. Metacritic score of 42, so not particularly well loved. Yeah, so the highest ranking is, or rating, I suppose, is a 67 from IndieWire. THR and Variety both have it below 50. Not great. Ooh, wow, the New York Post put it at 25. Not bad, not bad. It's got Morgan Freeman in it? Hang on. And Paul Bettany, Cillian Murphy, Kate Mara. Yeah, this is quite the cast. What is going on here? Rebecca Hall, too. What do I know her from? Oh, Christy, that's right. That was good. I might have to rewatch that. I haven't seen that in a long time. I don't know what I was saying. Oh, yes, that's right. Jack Paglen. That's what I wanted to see. Wanted to take a look at some of his other credits, because being best known for Transcendence. Oh, that's right. Alien Covenant, which I haven't seen any of the, like Covenant or Prometheus, or I think they have a new one that's currently in production. I haven't seen any of the new... What am I saying? I haven't seen any of the Alien movies. Have I? I think the only Alien movie I've actually seen is AVP, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, no, I can't think of any. And I've wanted to obviously watch the original one for a very long time. It's been on my list, but it's one of those movies where I'm like, it's an iconic part of the culture. It's an iconic movie. And it's like when I do watch it, I want to actually pay attention to it because I know that I'm going to like it and I know it's going to be good. And it's also difficult because it is nominally a horror movie. And while I don't expect to necessarily be scared, my rule is to always, or rather only, watch horror movies when it's dark outside. And with it being, we're transitioning into summer, it just gets dark so late. I get started watching other movies, and then it's like, nah. So I definitely do want to watch all of these. I know that Alien 1 is obviously great. Alien 2, I think, is actually pretty good. Aliens. I believe that one's pretty good as well. Or at least moderately decent. Or maybe it's actually not good and it just has a cult following. But in any case, I want to go watch the whole rest or the whole series at some point. And now, again, I guess I've got an excuse, presumably, since Jack Paglen will be doing more stuff here in the future. But let's get back to the article, run through some of the more of the cast and crew here. Ellen Goldsmith Vane and Lee Stolman of Gotham Group, and Wick Godfrey and Marty Bowen of Temple Hill, who produced the original trilogy, are back to produce this one. Wes Ball, who directed the original trilogy, will also be involved as a producer. Wes Ball, I've talked about him before on the podcast, so I won't go on a large diatribe, but Wes Ball is the director of the upcoming Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So back to the article. Based on the best-selling book series by James Dashner, the first Maze Runner tome and the movie adaptation centered on a group of teens who find themselves arriving in a walled setting named the Glade with their memories wiped out. Beyond the four walls of the encampment lies a maze filled with deadly mechanical creatures and doors that shut every night at sundown. One new arrival figures out the key to the group's survival and attempts to lead them out. The subsequent movies and books opened up the setting, revealing a dystopian world with evil government organizations and foul corporations. The movies become larger in scope and more action-oriented. And that was one thing that I actually did like, not about the movies, but I liked about the books as the series as a whole. I really liked the way that Dashner sort of, we start out, I enjoy any story, where you start out in a very localized area, not entrapped, but enclosed in a localized area. And as the series progresses, you expand out and eventually break through into this wider world. And then the difference in scope from, say, thing 1 to thing 2 is drastic. I do enjoy stories like that. I mean, obviously that is a major component of Attack on Titan. The scope is very limited in the first season in particular, but broadly in the first 3 seasons, the scope is very limited. And then when we get to season 4, it's massive and it just expands and explodes into this whole broader universe. So I did like that aspect. Like I said, I didn't think the movie did it well, but I remember thinking very fondly of the second book. I thought it was my favorite of the series. Again, when I read it in middle school, so take that with a grain of salt. Maybe I wouldn't think they're quite so good now. Let's see here. Okay, so back to the article here. According to sources, this is the paragraph. This is why I put quotes in when I mentioned Reboot earlier. According to sources, the reboot is not a redo of the story, nor is it a direct sequel to the original trilogy, which starred Dylan O'Brien and Kaya Scodelario. Wow. The hope is to make a sort of continuation of the story, yet also return to the elements that made the first movie connect with its audience. The original movie, made by 20th Century Fox in the years leading up to its acquisition by Disney, also proved to be an unexpected moneymaker, generating $348 million worldwide, but costing only $35 million to make. That's what I mentioned earlier. That's, I think... Yeah, the 348 is just in reference to the original movie. Each of the subsequent films also made roughly $300 million. Each one, the budget for each one did increase slightly. I think $60 million for the second and $80 million for the third, or something along those lines. Those numbers might be switched around vaguely, but it's something similar to that. And like I said, the franchise as a whole would come to gross around $900 million, just below that $1 billion mark. So that is interesting, but it's weird the way that they're describing this. So the way that they say it's not a redo of the story, I think that sort of precludes the use of the word reboot right there. I mean, right at jump, they say it's not a reboot. It's not a redo of the story, and maybe that's just like a connotation of the word reboot. Maybe that's not the actual definition. Maybe that's just sort of a colloquialism that we've ascribed to the word reboot, is that it means a redo of the story, and that the actual definition of reboot is a little bit more broad and vague. That could be, but I don't know. So it's not a redo of the story, nor is it a direct sequel to the original trilogy. So the hope is to sort of make a continuation of the story. So it's just a sequel. Like, I don't know why we're using this word reboot. I don't know why we had to have a whole paragraph explaining that it's a sequel. You could have just said that it's a sequel, but it's not a direct sequel. And I mean, let's get back to the article here. I mean, they even compare it in some ways to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. It says, and it is a similar strategy the 20th century is employing with the upcoming Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which just happens to be directed by Ball. Kingdom is a reboot of the Apes franchise that does not remake the movies from the 2010s or the original one from the 60s and 70s, but connects by having a story with new characters set generations after the events of the previous film. As a writer, Paglen is also worked on Alien Covenant, the 2017 sci-fi monster movie directed by Ridley Scott, and was a co-producer on Magic Order, Netflix's series adaptation by the comic, was a co-producer on Magic Order, Netflix's series adaptation of the comic by Mark Miller. He's repped by CAA and Lichter Grossman. Just wanted to read that to end out the article there. But I want to get back to this comparison to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I don't understand. Like, it's just a sequel. Like, I don't understand. Like, what's I mean, okay, so it's the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a sequel to War for the Planet of the Apes, right? So, all right. So we have the original Planet of the Apes movies, the original 5, I guess. How many is there? So there's Planet, Beneath, Escape, Conquest, Battle. I just rewatched them, so I remember them all very vividly. So there's 5 of those, and then there's obviously the Mark Wahlberg reboot, and then we have starting in 2011, I believe, is when we get Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which is a reboot of the universe, but is not a reboot of like the original film necessarily. It's in some ways a sort of reboot of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. So in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, I'm not gonna go. I think they're fun to watch, so I'm not gonna, I guess, go in too much depth here because you'll get spoilers for Escape from the Planet of the Apes. But Caesar is like an ape servant. At this point in the universe, all of the dogs and the cats have died out, and so the humans have taken in apes, chimpanzees, as their companion animals, right? And Caesar is one of these companion animals, and he foments a rebellion and an uprising. So in short, it's a similar story insofar as Caesar is an intelligent ape, an ape who is much more intelligent than those around him, and he foments rebellion and sets apart this ape society, right, separate from human society. It is the beginning of the shift of man being the dominant species on the globe, right? Now, in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, they live in this sort of, it's like a weird, like, organized caste system. I think it was, at the time of release, it was supposed to be sort of vaguely dystopian, I believe. So somewhat like set in the future, so a little bit of high-tech advancement. Whereas Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the 2011, quote, reboot, was set in modern day. Caesar is not like a servant. There is no like ape slave class. You know, the basis of that film is that Caesar's mother gets experimented on and dosed with this medication, which increases her cognitive ability, and she gets, injected while she's pregnant with Caesar, whatever. Because of that, he's born with increased cognitive ability, a level of sentience and sapience that is not recorded in chimpanzees, right? And then he goes about the events of the movie and eventually foments rebellion. So that is a reboot. So I don't know why we have to have, and then so Rise of the Planet of the Apes, direct sequel Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, direct sequel War for the Planet of the Apes. After that is when we have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which is set like, I don't know how long off the top of my head. It's quite a ways in the future. I mean, the nature has retaken whatever metropolis that was. Maybe, I don't know if it's San Francisco, if they're going to continue to stay in that same area, or if they're going, I don't know what's happening. But that metropolis has certainly been mostly retaken by nature and the leaves and vines and stuff. And it seems that most of the humans are unable to speak, from the exception, or apart from the exception of the main female human protagonist. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. She can speak, and I have an idea as to why, but that's not what the point of this podcast is. All of that to say, that's a very long rant, just to say that Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a sequel. In no way is it a reboot. Like, I don't understand. The reboot, if we're saying that timeline is a reboot, the reboot would have been Rise of the Planet of the Apes, when they completely redo the story of how the apes, take over the planet and foment rebellion or whatever. Like, that's where the reboot is. Everything from then is then a sequel. I don't understand what we're saying here. And then to tie that back to The Maze Runner, again, it doesn't seem like we're rebooting anything. We're not redoing the story. It's just a sequel set a little bit far down the path. Why do we have to use this? Why are we obfuscating the language here? I think the reason that they wanted to stay away from that is because sequel is reverting back to what it was in the past, a little bit of like a dirty term. Like, there's more and more people are being like, oh my God, come up with something original. Like, we're going to be getting Toy Story 5, and there's a Mufasa sequel, or it would be the first Mufasa movie, but a prequel to The Lion King, and Frozen 3, and, more and more and more. I realize all those examples are Disney. Those are the only things that came up on top of head, but the Beetlejuice 2, is that Disney? I hope that's not Disney. That would be awkward. But my point is that I think the reason that they're framing this as a reboot, despite the fact that it's clearly not a reboot by presumably any definition of the word, and I guess I can look up the dictionary definition of a reboot. Let's see, what do we have here from Oxford? This is more in reference to computer reboot. Here we go. Maybe this. In serial fiction, the term reboot signifies a new start to an established fictional universe, work, or series. A reboot discards continuity to recreate its characters, plot lines, and backstory from the beginning. Okay, so like, granted, like this is I don't know what source this is, to reboot or not to reboot. Granted, these aren't like, okay, an IGN article. It has been described as a way to rebrand, again, a Polygon article. Who wrote that? Julia Alexander. Or restart an entertainment universe that has already been established. Is this going to be another article? Oh, that same book. Okay, so yeah, so again, granted, this isn't, exactly like a scholarly source. It's a preliminary, Wikipedia article. But in the first sentence there, a reboot signifies a new start, which discards continuity. And discards continuity to recreate characters, plot lines, and backstory from the beginning. To me, that doesn't sound like anything of what we're getting from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes or The Maze Runner. To me, they don't sound at all like changes in continuity or plot or backstory or anything. They just seem to me like sequels that are a couple years removed. There's one final point that I want to make on The Maze Runner here, and it's this. Why are we doing this? Again, nobody's clamoring for it, and this commentary is a little bit less. There's a little bit less of a point, I suppose, considering we've just gone through this whole diatribe about how this is not a reboot and it's in fact a sequel. But they're framing it as a reboot, and so I'm going to include it here. I don't think there's any need to reboot anything that is less than 20 years old. Okay, so the first Maze Runner movie, what does it say? It was in 2014. That was a decade ago. There's no need to reboot something from 10 years ago. There's just no point. I mean, frankly, I think reboots should be reserved for things that are more than 40 years past. But if you're going to reboot something, it's got to be at least, at minimum, 2 decades. It's got to be at least a whole new generation. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to be at least an entire generation removed. A decade, you're half a generation. That's it. Like, what are we talking about here? What's the point of doing a reboot? I don't know. It just makes me upset. And I mean, and it's different, I suppose, when we're talking reboots as far as, because I've certainly argued that I think I don't know if I'm in favor of it, but there's an argument that could be made that the MCU needs to do a reboot, a continuity reset after Secret Wars. There's an argument that could be made there. Like I said, I don't know if I agree with it, but that's a different question because it's in franchise, right? You're rebooting your whole franchise. That's not the same as doing a reboot of something, that is rebooting the entire franchise that is currently ongoing in a way that is what am I trying to say here? It's I don't know the word, but it's in line with like a method that has been done in comics for years past, right? I mean, DC is known for a continuity reset every once in a while. They're a little bit too fast and loose with them on the comic side as far as I'm concerned. But it's a mechanic, if you will, that it's an established parameter in the comics universe. And so there's a different argument that could be made in the Marvels. Granted, the whole thing is only, what are we at, 15? Honestly, actually, in 3 years, it'll be, or in 4 years, it'll be 20 years since Iron Man 1 came out. So that hits my 20-year mark. So never mind. Disregard that entirely. It's the same. So if you're going to reboot something, I think it needs to be at least 20 years removed. I think if you're rebooting something, it needs to be explicitly for a new generation, right? And I don't know. It's not, I don't know. But like I said, this whole point of contention is slightly moot because we've gone through the whole explanation of how, despite their framing it as such, this is not, in fact, a reboot. But we're going to leave it there. We certainly talked for long enough. Comment down below. Let me know what you think. Is this something that you are interested in seeing? Obviously, presumably, it wouldn't have been something at the top of your mind, but are you interested in seeing it in the theaters? Are there any other projects that you think would have been better served to have been, rebooted? Are there other properties from 20th Century Fox, say, or 20th Century Studios, or from other production companies that are more than a decade past that you think should have been rebooted if they're going to reboot anything? Let me know down below. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode and you want to see more content from us. We will be back here tomorrow with a brand new news segment, and I will see you guys then.